Rabbit, rabbit, rabbit. Hello friends, how are you doing today? Now, did you know that there is a phrase in England, probably maybe even regional, I don't know, it might be regional, it might not be, but either way, there's a phrase which you say at the start of the month, say at the start of the month, which is rabbit, rabbit, rabbit. I was taught it by my grandmother. No idea why. It's one of those stories which kind of comes out of nowhere. We were taught, I think it was like a day when we were staying at theirs for one reason or another, and there we were. We got told in the morning, first of the month, the first thing you should say is rabbit, 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 or white rabbit, white rabbit, white rabbit. And for years and years, I assumed it was maybe Catholic. I mean, the background behind that is that my grand's family were Catholic prior to, marriages and whatnot. So my mother was brought up Catholic. She went to Catholic school. But this was something we were taught, and I assumed it was that because, the rabbits and everything. And then, I say rabbits and everything like that's a common thing, because of Easter, I think, is the association I made more than anything else. But we had this as a phrase which was said, and it stuck with me. Turns out it's probably more paganistic than anything else. It's a kind of like a magic seal of protection, which you do for yourself, your family, as you start the day of the year. And you do it every month. At the end of the year, apparently, 28 to 31 days later, it expires. It's got an expiration date on protection. Later in the month, you got to be careful. You got to be careful of these things. I also learned it's the year of the dragon, which apparently, is my birth year. Zodiac, if you follow the Chinese zodiac. But whatever that means. I don't know. All that is to say is I was reminded of it because it is January. It'll be mid-January by the time this episode gets to you, which is shocking. There'll be like 2 or 3 weeks already disappeared. Who knows how quickly time will go. After this, hopefully it still continues a day at a time. Because if it speeds up or slows down, that's going to cause problems in the grander scheme of the world, which I just don't think we can handle. But it's that time of year. You may have even seen the episode prior, which included my brother and his partner, as we discussed how the internet isn't cool anymore. And I think that was an important topic for us to discuss. But mainly I liked that episode because it reminded me, every so often I forget, it reminded me of how alike yet different me and my sibling are in how we approach a problem within the world. Right? We had very similar, if not identical, childhoods. We entered the world, and then at that point as well, we just kind of diverged. So we have very similar mannerisms, very similar takes on things, but there's some key points, some key elements where we're just like, we don't end up in the middle. We don't end up in the middle of how to handle a problem or a solution at any one time. And it was just a nice reminder of that because, it's good to have those reminders every so often. Just reignite why you're comfortable being you and why, your sibling may be comfortable being them. And the same with partners. If you end up with a partner, you can look at them and think, wow, we had, basically similar lifestyles, and then look at us now. Look at us doing the thing. We don't know how things are going to turn out or how we're going to process information. But we were talking about the internet, and we were talking about how to solve a problem and how to progress as a society. And I think what I took away from that whole conversation was there's an aspect of society who I guess I just hadn't really considered, who were looking for a greater power to provide the solution. And that's what they were weighing on. We talked about content, and we talked about creation and doing things in the world, and people having unique insight and perspectives and how they get to demonstrate that in an online realm. And I think that's, extremely valuable, extremely important. And I think, I appreciate that. To me, those things come from things like Reddit and people pushing the boundaries and exploring different things in their own style and not really worrying about the greater world outside the window. But just thinking of it from more of a point of view of this is what I enjoy doing. I still get this question now. I mean, we're in like season 9 now of doing this show. We've done a lot of this. I've been going since 2017, and people the question I usually get is, hey, you still doing your podcast? Or why are you still doing your podcast? And I think when I get this question, it always surprises me because on one hand, why wouldn't I? Unless life had gone in the way and I wasn't able to support this. Or I started to hate it. But genuinely, I just still find this fun. I find it fun to be able to sit and take a topic and wax on it, you know? Take an idea and explore it. And I think that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me engaged with it and wanting to do more of it. And speaking to guests, that's always really fun. And I just genuinely enjoy it. I enjoy the challenge of conversation, I guess, more than anything else. It's not many parts of life you get to really enjoy, but I really enjoy that. So that's why I do keep going. But I think that's a valuable point for me to remember every once in a while. So maybe, keep asking me that question. I don't mind. You can keep asking me all you want. We'll see where it ends up. One day I may answer differently. But until that day comes, we're still plowing ahead. I like being able to take something conceptual, because this is a conceptual space, right? Really, realistically, this is a conceptual space. I can do whatever I want with it. I will do whatever I want with it. Because to me, again, it's fun. It's fun to experiment. It's fun to take the script and say, hey, oh no, this isn't doing what I want it to do. Or maybe I can explore this in a different way and explore that from that point of view. So I think that's the other aspect of it. I think people forget that they have full control over their own work. They have full control over the things which they want to do. When you focus on what you're creating rather than how the audience may interpret it, if anything, it's just as important as focusing on how the audience might interpret it. It's just as important to look at how and why and where and all those, words. I was going to say adjectives, but I don't think they are adjectives. They're not verbs either. What are they? What are the who's, what's, why's, and where's? Someone with English knowledge, bring those words to me. I had a point. But why was I considering this? Why was I considering what I do, why things are doing in the start of the year? Well, I'm doing it because it is the start of the year, right? Realistically, that's why anyone does it. That's why most people do it. That's what initially inspired me to sit down and talk today, and then I've had to do it again because I've got to put the microphone on the first time. Is this aspect of start of the year, redo, renew, regrow, all those things, new you, new year. That's not how that phrase goes, but that's where we're sitting. And speaking to my brother kind of led me to that as well. There is a lot of conversation about how to get started with something, how to grow in something, how to invest in something, whether it's yourself, your work, your mentality, your hobbies, all these things. There's all this conversation of this. And it becomes a very reflective period. And I'm definitely not a person who likes to prescribe an arbitrary date to something, right? Because to me, an arbitrary date to something adds pressure to it, especially the first of the year. The first of the year is a nice reminder. It's a nice reminder to take a little stock, to reflect, to look at things. But people often use it as more of like a mirror time. They become mirror people, and then it's mirrors on mirrors on mirrors. And I mean that by they look at it and they go, oh, well, this is me, and I'm looking at the mirror and I'm comparing and contrasting to everybody else around me. And suddenly they find themselves in a deficit because they look at everything else as better. Better's a loaded word. Better's the word which inspired today's podcast. Better, I think, is a bad word for improvement, in a way. Understand what I'm saying? Better to me has suggestions of too abstract, too much, too grown, too many O's in that too. Better to me is an interesting one because, so the post which I saw was in an arts subreddit, and it was someone asking, how do I get better at drawing? All right, that's the question. How do I get better at drawing? You see so many things like that. How do I get better at this? How do I get better at that? How do I get better at, dealing with myself? How do I get better at losing weight? How do I get better at sport? How do I get better at this instrument? Bettering is too much. It is wide, vast. What do you mean by better? What do you mean by better in drawing? Do you want to be better at shading? Do you want to be better at perspective? Faces? Animals? Color? Tone? Style? What is better to you? How does better affect you? And I often find when people ask better, they're asking it in a sense of the wider world as well, which is more intriguing. Because it means they're making comparison of better, that whatever had to exist before you is clearly better, right? And in some ways, I'm not dismissing everything which came before us, that would be ignorant. What I'm saying is just, what exists right now isn't necessarily better than what you could create by instead exploring what you enjoy, right? This was part of the conversation I was having with mine. We all know creators pander, right? Creators pander. They see what is popular and they make something which reflects that. They make something which is reflective of what is popular now in order to get more appreciation within the algorithm. I can't even say it wrong. I tried saying it wrong. I tried to say a logarithm, but it didn't come out because it's algorithm, guys. It's just algorithm. Martin, stop trying to break my language. But algorithmically, they are trying to do something which gets them that exposure, so their real passion can shine through. But in doing that, they're altering. They're assuming that that is a better way of doing it. They're assuming that that is the better is the exposure, the better is the push out of it. I think I had this. There was a line when I was discussing with Dan Does about things, where we were talking about of if this wasn't popular, is it worth keeping going? And I guess it made me think of my own stuff, of how it would be nice to have a large audience, but it's definitely not the reason I do this. It would be nice to be fully sponsored and, pushed out into the world and featured on things, but it's really not why I do this. It's not the core integral reason for setting up a mic and a camera in 2017 and saying, hey, let's chat into a mic, let's see what happens, let's take the thought and run with it, let's embrace the chaos which is a wandering thought and put that onto a page, and then see how we can make that interesting and how we can avoid that, necessity of monotony of doing things. So when we get to the point, we kick back and we say, do you want to get better? It concerns me. It concerns me for what people are really asking and how they can do more. So as we approach this milestone, as we approach this January 1st milestone, and we get into it and we sit and think, hey, what am I doing? Whatever you want to look at, whether it's your diet, your health, your mental health, your creation, your music, your art, your general ability to tell jokes or finish a sentence, all of these things come into question because people are very reflective. We're in the mirror world. Everyone's a little mirror ball. Mirror world. I'm trying to remember what the actual quote from Maya Bush is, but it's disappeared out of my brain. So when we get to this period of time, I almost feel like, and to use the phrase which I dislike, I think there's a better way to approach better. I think there's a better way. I think there is a way of looking at everything and saying, hey, this is what we have right now. What do I actually need next, right? What do I need to progress, to improve? Not better, but progress. Because better isn't always part of progression. Worse sometimes is part of progression, and I think that's important to remember too. Failure is just as valuable within success is within success. Do you know how rare it is to do something one time, first time, and it go right? That's almost impossible. For it to go perfect? Nobody cooks pizza the first time and it's perfect. No, you cook pizza the first time, you look at it and go, bunch of things went wrong. Let's resolve those things. Everyone does it. So why would we approach getting better, improving oneself in any other way which is separate from that? So I got a little bit of advice for you. I got some advice for you as a cis, straight, white man on the internet. Because why not at this point? I got to try and balance out all the nonsense information and nonsense thoughts and feelings from other straight, cis, white male. That's all I'm really doing. I'm providing a foil to those. I'm balancing the act between this group of people. If I can do that, then even better. Maybe that's what this podcast is. It's just a foil to those concepts. Now, so I think the first thing to do when you identify anything you want in your life, right? When you identify anything where you're thinking about making changes, to think why you want to make a change. I think that's pretty important. You got to think why you want to make that change. Why you want to indulge in some level of creatorial, corporeal, maybe not even sure that's the word, thought progression. Why do you want to do it? Is it because, when you think about, let's talk haircuts. When you think about the haircut, right? When you think about your hair, why do you want to change your haircut? Why do you want a better haircut? Is it because my hair's too long, right? Maybe it's something where it's getting in your way of your job. Maybe it's making things dangerous. Maybe it's bad for your health. Maybe it's affecting you negatively in that way. Maybe it's affecting interpersonal relationships. Maybe it started a small coup with the hair on your back and your bum, and they've been telling lies about you. Maybe the haircuts in different places are colluding. You just don't know. I have no haircuts in other places. Mine's like a protected forest. You're not allowed to trim there. That was a terrible joke. But why? What's the actual deal? Maybe your hair doesn't reflect who you are anymore. Maybe you just want an adjustment. Maybe you just want to shock your visual image into change. Maybe the visual shock is for yourself rather than anybody else. Maybe you want that consideration, and that's something which is also important to take into account. But I think you need to identify why, right? You need a why if you're going to try and make a change, because that why is going to carry you further than anything else. That why is what you're going to hold on to when it doesn't go right the first time. That why is going to what you hold on to when you change something and it doesn't quite work the way you want it to, or maybe it didn't get the reception that you're thinking, or you're creating or struggling within any new practice that you're doing. That why is what's going to be there. Now, if your why is to be great within a week, you have the wrong why. That why will do you no good. That why will only support you for a week, and then the first time something goes wrong, that why will not support you. Because that means you'll fail over and over again, and that's not good for your mental health. It's good to fail, but when the why is the fail, then, that's an adjustment you may need to make. But once you've identified that, once you've figured it out, once you got it down on the paper of what the why is, I think the next stage is the what. Right? What do you actually want to change? I was saying this before when I was saying better multiple times, and it probably got too much, and it's now a weird word, and you can't say the word better without thinking about this. But if you're looking at something you want to change, you got to figure out what you actually want to change, right? Is it the style? Is it the cut? Is it the shading? Is it the tone? Is it the perspective? Is it the voice? Is it everything? If it's everything, you're going to have to list those things out, because if you change everything at once, something's bound to go wrong, and it's like dominoes. My dad gave me a great metaphor years and years ago. When I was going through some stuff and I was figuring out where I wanted to be, and I was looking at new jobs and new locations to live and all those things, and he described it in a way which I guess I already knew, but because he gave me a visual image to it, it stuck with me much longer, was the idea that if you have a chair with 4 legs and you want to correct one of those legs, you don't correct the other 3 at the same time. You don't, because at some point the chair will fall over, and it's important that the chair stays stable, right? And that's very clean advice. That's very good advice, in my opinion. That's probably some of the best advice I could ever get. Was that if you adjust one thing, adjusting the other things becomes even harder, because if you trim one leg and trim another leg, you're gonna eventually just ruin the balance. You trim one thing at a time. Correct one leg at a time. The seat stays stable. Sure, it might be a bit rocky at times, but it stays pretty stable and you still sound it. Or, you're going to have to wipe out all 4, in which case you sat on the floor. It's just about a couple of inches off the floor instead of actually on the floor. To the point. You need to figure out what you want to adjust. You got the why, you got the what. You need to narrow that down. And then you just need to take the time with it, right? You need to take the time with it. I think I said at the beginning, it's rare things go right the first time. It's rare a change will balance itself in a capacity which makes you satisfied the first time. And if it does the first time, I think that's almost more dangerous. Because if it goes right the first time and then doesn't go right the second time, you'll spend the second time just beating yourself up of, what did I do wrong? did exactly the same thing as I did last time. And yet, it went wrong. That makes no sense. This can't be. Am I a failure? Am I the problem? And then you blame other things. Blame other things, and things didn't go well, and you're back to square one of the why. Why did you want to change? I didn't expect to get into this discussion at the start of the year, but in some ways I did. But I think I had a bit of inspiration in speaking to Martin and Amy and seeing the posts which I was seeing online, because you see a lot of these at this time of year where people, they want feedback, they want discussion, and they want encouragement, and they want to figure it out, which is great. The only way we progress as a society and as individuals is by addressing the things which are dragging us down and addressing the things which don't provide some level of self-improvement. I'm not saying you have to throw yourself against a wall every day to become tougher. I'm just saying that if your want or your why is to be able to survive situations, then the what is figure out how you react in those situations. Move forward accordingly. But this is just advice. This is advice a couple of weeks into January as well, because I think it's better to start things at a later date in January, not link it to that overall weight that everyone has of wanting to start things on the 1st. It just adds too much weight, adds too much pressure. Start this week, start tomorrow, start today. If you had the idea, why not start today? Because I don't have time. I get it. But if you had the idea, maybe start today, maybe even just read about it. Read about the thing which you want to improve. Start researching it. And see where you end up. Remember, it's a process. It's always going to be a process. That's why things like this are still fun. Because you can change one thing and it can change the dynamic of everything. I'd be curious to hear if you have any insights into your year. If you made any promises to yourself. If you have any whys. Maybe this helps, maybe it doesn't. Till then, I hope you had a very good December. I was obviously off. I hope you have a fantastic January. And if not, an okay January is also acceptable. A bad January isn't acceptable, but it's livable. That's something to remember. And I hope all goes well for you. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.